And man, nobody really, I feel, warns people enough about exactly how complex it is to raise a child in conjunction with dealing with the world.
And trying
And
to activate.
I mean, don't even put that on the list.
And that's what we wanted to talk to you
All
about.
right,
Like,
well,
but yeah, it's crazy.
that's
I
something
think
that we
we
can.
wanted to get your experience because it always sticks in my mind the analogy that you used with like trying to activate. It's like you're a spaceship flying through space and you're trying to repair the ship while flying the ship at the same time because you can't land it. You're still flying through, and then it's like you got three mini ships with you that you're trying to get repaired too because you didn't even build them right because when you built them
Yeah.
you were jacked up.
Yeah, yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
and build it, and build is the perfect thing, and don't get me wrong, there's nothing that can be repaired. Anything
Yeah.
can be accomplished as long as you have the knowledge that takes you to the future of when it was accomplished. Okay, so that's the most important thing, is that knowledge is the future. Like it's not saying knowledge is the future, like we need to have knowledge and that's the way to the future. No, knowledge really is the future, because if you have enough knowledge, there is a part in the future where anything that you've done that you may feel like you need to balance out, the knowledge can get you to that point in the future where that actually got balanced out. Okay. So the thing about, especially with having children, is the seed itself. And the seed, and this is just preemptive, like in the future, if we choose to have any children, or anyone listening choose to have any children, should know from the male standpoint, the seed should be cultivated because it produces a different kind of child. And the cultivation of the seed is when the male is actually, of course, holding the semen, and that's Montauk Chai's multi-orgasmic man. It doesn't mean that you're just celibate. It means that you understand how to cycle the energy in semen up the spine, because that's the male fuel supply. And then those semen are like OG Kush. They're not the same as regular dirt weed, meaning that they actually have been fermented, and they've grown up as seeds themselves. They've been in the incubator a lot longer, so they understand more about the mechanics of the reality, which they're experiencing through you. And then when the seed is planted, then one must figure out completely what grounds can handle this seed. And analyzing that, like from the parable of the sower. Is this person susceptible to the birds plucking up their seed? Is the ground really fertile? All these kind of things are what to be examined, which would be examined by any farmer before he spends all his time in the field planting anything, because that work ain't going to be pulled back, right? So they're going to make sure that they're going to plant the seeds in a place that they're going to grow. Remember, none of this is now accounted for when we're producing children. So again, the history is continuing to repeat itself, but we got the panacea, which is basically being able to make a cripple climb trees. You can make anything that's in the reality that's in balance based on yourself. When you attain balance, it balances out all your actions, because you're like a human organ. Then you're emitting this balance in all the biorhythmically connected things that are around you. Anything that you create reflects that balance. So then what happens though is that to understand, like what I've been dealing with personally with raising a child, is now, first of all, like I have a very strong aura. Like I work a lot on my aura. And so what that does is it holds a field. So there's literally like a quasi bubble, if you may, around a large radius of where I am. And all of the other bubbles are most of the time inside of that. And that does allow them to nurture themselves into an environment. Now with my daughter in specific, when I did have her, I was using the process of cultivating the seed. And with this child is, and she's not vaccinated. So, I mean, she doesn't sleep really. She doesn't get sick. She's 1 year old. She's already doing her talking. She's already doing a lot of different things that when we see her around the other kids, if in the event that she's around other kids, she just has to go in with the kids that are like 5 or 6 because of how independent her character is and things. But the same things that every child deals with are still prevalent. It's just amplified. So I always have this joke about vaccinated parents and non-vaccinated kids. It's just, oh my goodness.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
work on getting your sleep. It's like they're awake all the time and you're like, oh, I guess just barely hanging on. Let me just take a goji berry or something here. But so what I've been working with is that I've been using a lot of common sense, and a lot of this you can read about, I believe, in the Montessori teaching, which is a school that's been up for quite a bit of time. And the way they teach, they don't start the child off with curriculum, basically. They start the child off with integrating with the reality, animals, those kind of things, blocks, paintings, cleaning things, understanding how to be potty trained, just the things that allow the child to see what the mechanics to life are, more so than hammering them with a curriculum right away. It's obviously because they have to make it in the world that they're going to need to learn something. But remember, I'm not anti-technology either. Like some people are very anti-technology, and they just basically want to eliminate any kind of help. It's like I talked about today or the other day on my Facebook about there's a documentary I watched from Vice News, and it's called Last Chance High, and it's about basically a school in Chicago that is for children that have been kicked out of school. And man, it's off the chain. Like, I mean, in many parts of the documentary, it just moves you to tears because you see the real time situation. But what happens though, if you don't get your thinkers up front to that use the same thing, like the same thing how I figured out all this stuff about spirituality, I can just turn the beam on that. Because what you're really doing is you have this big ass beam, excuse my language, but it's like a laser. And anything you focus the laser on, you can give power to it. You can bring light to it once you get your consciousness honed in. So they can ask you a question about stuff that you don't even know anything about, and you only need to ask a few more questions to get a firm understanding, and then speak on it as if you have been doing it all your life. So when it comes to problems, then is what I'm saying, you're the guy to call, because you could solve all problems, because you could just put all the pieces in another context and then figure out how you would have solved it that way. But it's simple with this kind of thing. Not so simple, I'll say, because how long it would take to implement if there wasn't more people into stuff like this. But this is what happens. Anytime that a person, first of all, environment is the number one thing that affects the DNA. If you want to understand DNA, and all the studies have been done on DNA, and what was concluded is that environment controls more of the DNA even than the person's mind. And this is because they're constantly soaked in the environment and constantly exposed to it. So if you have these children, even at this school that's supposed to be helping them or doing anything that's supposed to be helping them, but overall, the hours of their day is still spent in that same kind of environment, in that nucleus, then there won't be really any changes on a level that's ever going to be effective. They may regress for a moment from their current behavior, but then pick it up even stronger at another point because it's still the environment. And the environment that they're seeing the most is in their dreams. So the effects of PTSD and in conflictive realities reflect more in a child's dream than it does actually in waking state. It's just most don't examine the dreams, like Freud and Jung based all of their concepts and theories and everything were off of dreams because of how much it's intrinsic on investigating what a person has going on that they are not going to tell you. And so in conclusion, what I was saying is that, first of all, virtual reality has now been introduced, which is basically the Oculus Rift is one of them. And what this really is the same thing in the dream world. Dream world is like virtual reality. And because I know about both of these topics and I have virtual reality device at the house, then I see where the connection is. Like basically, when you're in the dream and you're on top of the building, you jump, you feel the G's in your stomach that you're falling. And this is generally what keeps people from flying in the dream, which you can fly in the dream, of course. But because when you jump off something, you feel like, shit, I'm going to fall and then I'm going to die, then you don't fly. And this is a step-by-step of how the dream world is really built. The dream world is built on how we perceive the physical world. So anyway, let me fast forward here. So what happens is that if you would take this child and put this child into an environment, let's say 2-3 hours in the Oculus Rift daily, the actual game is designed as just an open source reality in which the child can interact with other things besides what's in their environment. It would only be probably a week and a half before you would see a drastic recovery in this child's behavior. Because the only thing that's really happening, which is what most of these children are complaining about, is that their environment as a big fish is too small. So the places that they have access to is always trying to control them. People are trying to control them. They grab in their arms, and then they got to go home, deal with their mother, and then she may be on some drugs, and then it's just repetition every day. So they're never getting a chance to step out. So what happens, though, is that if you introduce something like this, people say, well, no, we need to work with spirituality. Technology has never been a solution. But they'll be telling you this on Skype or telling you this on Facebook. And what I see these days, and I watch it all over the world, like I watch, what's going on in Baghdad and what's going on in Syria and all these different places, and it's all really the same thing. It's just the frustrations that of not being able to get out of this shell that we built around ourselves, and getting no rope into a reality that is not like that, to begin to control what does really belong to you. See, this reality doesn't belong to us. It belongs to all of us. It is a collective build. And that's why the strongest mind or strongest projection of the reality will win. And right now it's depression. The reality is depressed. The trees can actually move. When they're in another frequency, they can move. But in this frequency, they're stuck. So what happens is that in that grander state of consciousness, that's when we start getting that's when things start moving. That's when the foundation starts to shake. And so what we should do, well, I can't say what we should do, what we get a chance to do if we want to do it, is start looking intrinsically at what we have available in this reality now to allow our children to utilize, that will give them the window into other worlds and how those worlds really function, and break spatials mainly. The first spatial broke is flying, because generally human can't fly. And this then signifies how many directions you can go in. And that's actually how you gauge a being. You gauge a being by how many directions it can move in on the spiritual plane. That's just some of the more adept knowledge. But humans, they generally front, back, left, right, not up, as far as by themselves. So to gain another spatial, you need to be able to fly. So all you need is a simple sim. This sim is you fly all day in virtual reality for about 3 hours. It won't be long till the child starts flying in the dream. And once they start flying in the dream, they defy the laws of that world that is appearing in their dream. And then it becomes an illusion. And then they gain back control over the world that really belongs to them, which is their own inner world, that inner space, as it's called. And that's, again, one problem solved. Okay, but now this problem is crowdfunding. That's how you solve that problem. You introduce the whole thing. You explain how it's going to work. You need the developers of the game. It just so happens Oculus is an open source device. You can program in Unreal, Creative, all those different programs that make some of the best games that they see today. And all you're doing is creating a world that looks like, it could look like Costa Rica. And they're going to enjoy being in there, because how VR is accomplished is zero latency in your head, meaning that you put on these goggles, and when you turn like this, inside it looks like this. And this tricks the shit out of the mind. Excuse my language again, but it is so interesting to me as how easy it is to trick consciousness. This is also why I started really looking at, I started kind of with optical illusions. And that was the first thing that really started getting me going. And then in virtual reality, you see the height of that what's real is what you think, what the mind thinks it's looking at, not what you think you're looking at, because the mind gets it first and processes it so fast, then it sends the message to you. That's how it's all working. So it's not you really controlling whether you think that this reality is real until you get onto that level, because before then it's just instinct. It's what you've been trained to believe is real. Like, you can't walk through that wall, right? I can talk about a time where I went into a high frequency and I was told to walk through the wall. Actually, not to walk through it, to run through it. And because of how much I had already experienced to that point, I took off running. And I hit the wall, but it was a good try. What I'm saying is that I mean, there was already so much going on before that. I said, you're right. But then they were like, no, it's a metaphor. I was like, oh, it's a metaphor. But on one occasion, to clean it up, I went into the higher frequency, and what began to happen was I can see through the wall into other apartment buildings, like the people next door and the people next door. And I was able to see that. And then that started concaving itself into itself. And then I started seeing larger organisms that were in fact connected to those people. And then once I saw that, I just chose not to see anymore. And I looked down, because it was really, I just didn't know how to take that, because I didn't know anything about oversouls. I didn't know anything about silver lines. and people on silver lines being basically tethered to their oversoul, just so when they go nuts or do something crazy, there is something monitoring that and can prevent things from occurring. But the big stage, and we're ending the last 10 minutes, a big stage, and we're going to goes in with the children, but a big stage which we talk about in this curriculum, one of the more of the final phases is called the oversoul. And this is basically because the oversoul can't be seen, and I can't stress to people enough, just don't see any of these things as especially human beings or entities, but more of introspection, that what this really is it's not like a consciousness as we know it. It's just like a hard drive of some sort. And it's just storing all the experiences that we're having, just like DNA does. All DNA is doing is eating up the experiences, packing them away in the RNA, I believe, and then doing it again. And that's its job. So somehow this thing is connected to that process too. But you have the ability to upload yourself into it and become it. And then when you do that, you begin to control all of the subsequent yous that are scattered across the dimension, because we are simultaneous. There are some sequentials. Sequential means a being that's coming back over and over again and staying in that same existence. A simultaneous is a being that has multiple versions of itself running on the platform at the same time. Just in case if one is killed, there's always at least 50 other ones still running. And this is just something that we learn how to do. And that's what I was saying. The Cometans, they were doing all this. They were the first ones to figure out how all that really worked and how to really make that possible. And in fact, I believe that they created it, because other than that, there was nothing else to create anything. You see what I mean? It had to all jump off from somewhere. And from what I'm reading in my studies and what I've seen in my experiences, that this is where this comes from. So in conclusion with the children is to realize that, first of all, when a child is conceived, what goes on is that when the two parents come together, they begin to rub together because they're phi. So the symbol of the X, which is what you see when you look down on a pyramid, is also what we call 10 in Roman numerals. Okay? And this is because on the bottom of the pyramid, there's another pyramid that has the exact same size. So the pyramid is actually what would be a diamond or a rhombus. Okay? And so this template is letting us understand to a certain degree how the body is designed. And I'm catching my state of mind here because I really want to explain exactly what goes on, again, when children are birthed. So what happens is that 5 and 5 come together, or phi and phi come together, and they make 10. Meaning they bring a child into a dualistic world that has zeros and ones. Again, when phi and phi come together, which are two shells, they make this shape, which we call the heart. Okay, now look at a shell from the side when it's cracked. Crack open a piece of shell and look at it from the side. It's a symbol like this. It looks like a 9 kind of without connecting. Actually, it's a 9. When you put two 9s together, they make a symbol that looks like a heart. And that's also called a Viv. So the heart symbol, which is really a Venusian symbol, at first came from Venus because Venus is connected to phi. Venus is known to come from the shell. So what I'm explaining is that, and Venus is in charge of the love, right? So two people come together, and then 2 5 come together, and they make 10, and then they birth this being into a physical world. Now, how this looks on the spiritual plane is it looks like a light. These two people start coming together, they come together, and they start the friction, which is going on. And then as the friction begins to build, there is a climax point. And what this looks like on the astral plane is this light. But all the lights are different colors. There's no light that is the same spectrum. And it's because there's no two people that are the same. Even what you ate today changes you forevermore from tomorrow. You'll never be able to get to that point again. Even there's other things in your reality that are affecting the frequency of the reality, allowing you to only be in this point at one time. So on the astral plane, what this child sees when it's coming into conception from inception. Remember, the child is already existing. It's been incepted. This inception is generally a collective between the mother and the father that took place at another point. It could have been early in their lives. It's a commitment when we say we're going to be together. From that point, a child could be incepted right then. There's many children that are not in the physical reality that people have around them all the time. But the ones that make it into the physical reality make it from inception to conception. And boy,
man seed.
Say it again.
That begins with the man seed that's cycling through him.
Well,
does that have a correlation to it?
Well, it would be easier to see it as, well, first of all, yeah, it is. Then these questions are really difficult to answer because it depends on the level of the individual and how much they really know about all this stuff. Because a person who is aware of this completely will generally keep its children on the other plane. And so that being will have multiple inceptions. And those inceptions, if you have a third eye, you can see them around them. In fact, in ancient Chinese traditions, in Tibetan traditions, they call it homunculus, the golden lotus. And it's basically about only bringing entities into the internal worlds and having them aid you that way. And they're basically your own children, versus the conception that there was always warnings about the conceptions is what I'm telling you. That's why the Bible begins with the whole act of conception being a problem, right? And it's because when you bring your idea then into a world of other ideas, that's what makes the limitations in this reality, is because not everyone's not agreeing that we want to fly. Everyone's not agreeing that we really want to be together. Everyone's not agreeing that we should do this with the water. We have different states of mind, different personalities. So that's why the whole reality has got limitations, because if one person says they don't want it and the other person says that they do want it, it just means that it never happens. So, and it happens in some places, doesn't happen in others. You got to find places that are more adapted to your environment. So let's continue with the child. So if the child makes it from inception to conception. Now, this is also hidden in the secrets of the incubus and succubus, which gets more into the darker side of this, because the darker side is that you can incept distorted life forms. And this is when lust does that sometimes, because it brings forth a child that the conception of what they're creating is completely off, but they still create it. And then it's distorted. This is the same as having an idea that you didn't really research. And then when you start being in that idea or that business or whatever, and then it starts falling apart, and then that could be seen as deformed. And this is because the shell is not perfect. It's not perfectly on phi. And this is why they say that the most attractive people are perfectly on, or what we find attractive are closer to phi. Okay? So what happens is that when this child is brought through, what it goes through is it goes through all the planetary spheres that are basically shaping, molding, and fashioning it. And this is what creates the person's zodiacal stance. So if you saw this, what you would see is this being coming through portals, okay? And these portals are created by the mother and father with the chakras joined and fully charged. They call that climax. And then the child goes through, and in the first portal, the geometries are very complex, but we can make it simple. Let's say it's a square. Now what that globulous form will be is a cube when it goes through that first womb. And then when it goes through the second womb, let's say that second womb is a pentagram. Now it'll be a cube wrapped in a shell. Then let's say that the next sphere is a hexagram. Now it's a cube wrapped in a shell, wrapped in a hexagram. And these are also giving it not only its characters and traits, because everything is being done through weights and measures, like how much of Saturn are they getting? How much of Venus are they getting? And then it's also, again, governing their senses. It's a being that's really unlimited. But now it has to be converted to something that can survive in this world without destroying us all. And this is why they also say what Cain was a destruction to the world. And even in the Gnostic tradition, Yaldabaoth, who is also Cain, was destructive to his mother because of that kind of being didn't really mesh well with a physical world. So that's why we always have to govern our children. No, you can't do this, and you shouldn't do that, and you need to share. There's all these rules, because in this world, the child can't just go acting out like it's unlimited. It just can't. You see what I mean? So these are the facts of life. This is stuff that we have to look at from a whole nother level. Even if you wanted to, if you activate it here, you would destroy life. You would break Earth's water bag. If one human activates here too high and sends out an energetic charge, not an explosion. Explosions when they drop atom bombs. which are also, they rip holes into reality. But implosion, and you quirk, you're going to open up a gate, and then anything can come through into that gate. And let me explain how this is for you to get this very simple. The boundaries or the walls are your skin. They're synonymous with your skin. Okay, so if I poke a hole in your skin, now something can get inside of you. And this is the other thing, you understand. I understand the body is so unique because certain parts of the body are never exposed. There's not even, it's like a vessel, an alchemical vessel, a vacuum. It never air gets there. Because and the skin is responsible for that. And that's why the skin is synonymous, especially in Kabbalah, with the serpent. Mm-hmm. Like there's positive, negative sides to everything, but the serpent is a sheath. It has swallowed everything. Everything is living inside of it. That's why it's also synonymous with woman, because all the baby is living inside of its mother. You see what I mean? So that, and then that's why it becomes synonymous with the act of creating and bringing something into a physical world, because the serpent was a metaphor for a woman with a womb, because she can concept. And without that, man cannot live in the physical worlds. But still, nobody knows where the first man and woman really came from. And it's because the first being was androgynous and did this act on its own, meaning it went through the procedures of basically, and that's why you see the mother and the son, right? And then in the mysteries, they tell you the son is actually the husband too, because how realities really start anyway. Somebody had to have sex with somebody that was in the same family. I mean, that's how things get started. There's no other people. So these metaphors, again, it will show us that's the serpent eating its tail. It's us still producing ourselves from ourselves. So then when you're on the hunt, and this is where, it gets into key knowledge, and I want to close with this. When we're on the hunt for something external, okay, because remember, the reason why this act was really looked at as, maybe you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't divide yourself. So this is basically, you're talking to an androgen. It's got male and female in the same body, as we do now, but one of them is stronger than the other. So we're off balance. That's why you're either a male or a female. So it was, hey, I don't know if you should really divide. Why not? Well, if you divide, you're always going to be looking for your other half. And you're going to search and search and search and search and search. And you're going to then create time like that. Because when you can't find what you're looking for, that creates time. So this is what happens. The being says, I don't care what you're saying. Bam, birth something. So from that point, that thing that's birthed is not androgynous anymore. It's that's why I say Yaldabaoth is primarily a male, but also a female. And in the mysteries, that's why you get even the homosexuality playing a heavy role, because their deity that they're worshiping is hermaphroditic. That's why they show Baphomet as a hermaphrodite, but primarily a male. So the reason why it's important to understand this is that, imagine this. Before you were at a stage where you didn't need to go outside of yourself to sustain yourself. So everything that you needed was within. Now you're at a stage where you feel like everything that you need is actually on the outside. And because that's not where it is really anyway, you will continue to look for it forever until you realize that. And in that, they say, was one of the drawbacks to this thing, was that now we have a passion to find ourselves. So we constantly go and try to find the opposite race, and we do, or opposite sex, and we do everything that we can to find that opposing force. And opposite sex doesn't mean whether it's a male or a female that you're looking for, because there's some people that are gendered the other way. It's looking for something outside of oneself that is supposed to complete oneself's immortality. Immortality. Because remember, remember I told you the commanders wanted to be immortal on the physical plane. They were already immortal, but not on the physical plane. So the thing that was created was to become immortal on the physical plane by living through yourself. Birth continuously. So basically you dive back in. Every time that, as a male, when he goes into a woman, he's diving back into the matrix again, and then going to bring himself out again, hold himself. And then you see in the same thing, male, female, they're going to basically be dealing with themselves continuously. And so it's again, we're running out of hour, but it's deep stuff to really think about. And then to close this in and open it with the children is, see, that's why I started the Secret Energy, because I couldn't find anything out there that was really ready to deal with this like this. Like there was always, oh, you're not supposed to say this and all this and that. That's why I just branched off. And that's also why I stopped, especially recently, doing a lot of talking, because I'm just more into action. And what's being built is, it's a step-by-step process of this awakening. And we can say what it is because I've been keeping all the notes for the last 5 or 6 years of every single process of what I felt, what was going on, what I read, who showed up, what their name was, etymology, what it connect to, etc. Then you also have the connection, though, which is more important, because if everyone's waiting to hear from Sevan in order to get the message, and we got a problem, it's going to bog down with me, and it has. Like I need an agent or something. Like my career is way beyond what I can actually manage, and I'm doing everything that I can to do that. But it's better for me to just create what's going to allow each one of us to connect while moving out the things that separate us, like overlapping. You get a person who's level 1 in there with a level 12. They're not even going to be on the same levels anyway. So the conversation is probably going to annoy the level 12 and then make the level 1 feel jealous. That's called overlapping. You see what I mean? So but at the same time, as a level 1, if you know that there's a level 12 chat room and you just need a password to it, and you can get the password once you complete all these levels, you can guarantee that whoever's in that chat room is going to be able to tell you more about what's going on. But how the curriculum is designed, by the time you get to level 12, you're not going to need nobody to know what's going on. You're just going to be looking for your spiritual family, which is really everyone, but more so people that are biorhythmically connected to you. So what this is a bridge. Because there are people, just like me and you're talking right now, we were going to talk anyway. And the bridge was Skype today. And because I'm also reaching out more tentacles, per se, into the world, saying, hey, I know this knowledge. If you want to know it, I have no problem with introducing it to you and explaining it to you, or actually refreshing you about what something you already know.